Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, March 4th, 2024 West Fargo City Commission meeting. I'd like to call to your attention that Commissioner Mark Simmons is online with us this evening. And before we start, I'd ask that everybody in the room please silence your cell phones so we don't have any interruptions. With that, we call the meeting to order. Please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner George.
Here.
Commissioner Simmons.
Commissioner Simmons, we're calling the roll.
Commissioner Jordan.
Here, I can't hear Emily, Mayor, but I can hear you.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Records show that Commissioner Simmons can hear us. Thank you. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it's before you and it is in your packet.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next order of business is to approve the minutes of February 20th. Again, they have been distributed and in your packets.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of February 20th, 2024 as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item F is the building permit report from Planning and Zoning. Is there any discussion on these? It's in your packet.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the building permits as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have items A through D. It has been in your packet.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through D. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, we are now on the regular agenda. Madam Secretary, has there been anybody register for public comment? We do not have anyone. We close the public comment portion and we move on to item number 2 of the regular agenda. Item number 2 is the overview of Sanford Ambulance Services in the city of West Fargo. We're going to call on Tim Meyer, Senior Director of Emergency Services of Sanford Health. Good evening, Mr. Meyer, and welcome.
Good evening, President Dardis and members of the Commission. My name is Tim Meyer. I'm the Senior Director of Sanford Ambulance and Sanford AirMed. I do have a PowerPoint up there. You can follow along. I have a team of experts behind me. In case you have some questions, you want to probe a little deeper, they're the folks that really know the details of the ambulance service. So I have Chad Mickelson and Rick Cameron, they're Directors of Operations. Ron Lawler, he's the Director of Education, and Dr. Van Valkenburg, who's our Medical Director, as well as the Medical Director for West Fargo Fire Department. Kathy Lonsky is our Quality Improvement Advisor, and Christy Ingolstead is our Quality and Clinical Outreach person. She does a lot of training with the police and fire departments throughout the city, and I'm sure you probably know her. So, next slide. Do I control this?
Good evening and welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Oh, it's like a PDF. Okay. The first slide here, I just want to give you a little background on the ambulance service. Did we miss one? Oh, I'm sorry. We have about 100, just for history of the ambulance service, and hopefully it won't take too much of your time, but we have about 135 team members at Sanford Ambulance, 34 EMTs and 88 paramedics. We do have our own dispatch center, and we have 13 dispatchers there. Our footprint is pretty big. We go from the west, Mapleton, to the east, all the way to Hawley, and then up to Eulin, we cover up there. North of Fargo, we go up to Argosville, and south, we just go down to Horace, but it's a pretty good footprint. Overall, for Sanford Ambulance, we do about 32,000 ambulance calls in the metro area. That's certainly not West Fargo. We'll get to that in the report, but workforce development is the biggest issue for the ambulance service, and probably every ambulance service in this country. There's a shortage of EMS workers. We've employed a couple strategies. One was very interesting. Last year, we started a paramedic academy called the Sanford Paramedic Academy, whereby people that are selected for the academy can go to paramedic school for free, plus we pay them a salary to go to school. So paramedic school is long. Takes about a year to 14 months. Is that about right, Ron? About a year. So it's a big commitment. I've had a paramedic school in Fargo for decades. I think it started in 1984. And we've trained most of the people in the region as paramedics or EMTs. Each year we train thousands of people in emergency care courses, all the way from a babysitting class to paramedic school, which is affiliated with the North Dakota State College of Science. So folks that graduate our paramedic program can get an associate's degree through NDSCS. We are CAS accredited. CAS is the Commission on Accreditation of Ambulance Services. It's a national organization. Just for context, there are about 31,000 ambulance services in the United States. 182 are accredited by CAS. So we feel we're in elite company there. They were the only accredited agency in North Dakota and one of 4 in Minnesota. Coincidentally, we do our reaccreditation this year, so in May or June, we'll have a site visit by the national team to make sure we are meeting all the standards. So a little bit about West Fargo. Last year, this is a bar graph that shows each month of the year, and around 150 to 200 calls per month for ambulance in West Fargo. And for us, West Fargo is not just the city limits, it's every place that is addressed West Fargo, so that gets outside of the city limits a ways. That's just the way the data rolls. We don't cut it off by the city limit. So we did about 2,100 responses last year, which resulted in about 1,400 transports. So some of them are no transports where we've gotten to the patient and for whatever reason they didn't want to go. And sometimes we don't have any patient, no patient found, or we're at a standby, or there may be a deceased person that doesn't need an ambulance. So there's many of those each month as well. Not that many deceased people, but there's reasons that they don't need an ambulance. Okay, so here's a very busy looking graph. It's a 5-year volume for West Fargo. So there's 10,766 records in this report. So what it shows us is the volume hasn't changed a ton in the last 5 years. We only look back 5 years for this report, but we have data that goes back decades. And we've continued to average between 5.5 to 6.5 calls in West Fargo per day. You'll notice the spikes in this graph. They typically correspond with the fair. So there in July, we get an increase in volume for things out at the fair. They don't always result in an ambulance trip, but we do see a lot of patients, people at the fair. Here's our response volume. So when somebody calls 911, of course that rings into the Red River Regional Dispatch Center in Fargo. and they do a process called EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch Coding. So they ask a series of questions to determine the severity of the patient, and through a very statistically valid process that we decide which assets needs to go and if do we need to use lights and sirens. So right off the bat, we triage our calls down about 50% of the calls we do not respond to with lights and sirens. It's a national movement to reduce lights and sirens use in ambulance work because it's dangerous. You know, we drive 10,000-pound vehicles, and you know, we don't want to. We want our guys to be safe. We want to keep the public safe. So we do have a process for that. And all those EMD codes are reviewed by our medical director. And we kind of treat the dispatch or the use of lights and sirens like a medical intervention. So we use that judiciously to make sure we're applying it where it's needed the most. And just for context, like I said, we reduced about half the calls to not using lights and sirens. Only 2% of the calls we do in the metro area results in transporting a patient to the hospital with lights and sirens. So we're still over triaging them. And I have another slide later that kind of speaks to some of the other data too. So we'll get that if you have questions. So here's our response time performance for emergency calls. Our goal is 90% of the calls in less than 9 minutes. That's a national kind of rule of thumb for ambulance work in a suburban or urban setting. And overall for 2023, we met that goal like just over 90% of the time, 90.08%, so pretty close to the bar. You'll notice in August, September, October in there, we dipped below that benchmark. And we did change our deployment pattern in there to try to accommodate a change or a shift in our volume. But we constantly are looking at data. Our trucks are gathering data constantly. Every street they drive on, they gather that data. So when we get a call, the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch, knows which truck is closest based on real-time, our drive time data that's real. So we have a lot of data in our system. Top 10 primary impressions in West Fargo. I know this writing is very small. It's even smaller on my sheet of paper. But, so in West Fargo, injury of the head and generalized weakness are the top two condition or primary impressions for the patients here. And it's not like this is the majority of patients. If you see the count is 70 patients each for that. And that's out of 1,400 transports. So it's still about 0.5% of the calls. And you can read the list. What's interesting that you don't see here when we compare this data to like the city of Fargo data, the top 4 reasons in Fargo are behavioral health, intoxication, anxiety, all mental health issues are the top reasons in Fargo, but it's a little bit of a difference out here in West Fargo. And please, if you have a question, feel free to stop me and ask. Destinations. So how do we decide where people go? Another bar graph that kind of shows that distribution, the medium blue color at the bottom, which is the biggest representation here, is patients going to Sanford. The lighter blue is Essentia, and the darker blue at the top is the VA. And if you look at the numbers, that kind of follows the market value or the market in healthcare in our city. We take people, and I have another slide that kind of shows this, but we take people where they want to go generally. People are very loyal to their healthcare. They don't want to go where their doctor doesn't practice there, or their records aren't there, or they may have a snag with their insurance. So we try to accommodate that. They can't do it every time, but the vast majority of the time, we take them to where they want to go. Okay, here's destination choice. First of all, the pie graph in the upper right shows is our transport. So in the gray part of that graph, That shows the number of transports. So about 2/3 of the patients we see, we transport them, and the number count on that, again, writing's very small, 1378 for 2023. The light blue slice is patients not transported, and the dark blue is no patient contact. And like I said before, that could be standby events. We go to the fire, when there's a fire call, we'll go there. They don't typically result in an ambulance transport. Patients not found for some reason, that happens once in a while, we're canceled by police or fire, et cetera. So there's multiple reasons we don't get transported, but the bar at the bottom of the bar graph that goes from the left to the right is patient's choice. So the vast majority of people are transported to the hospital if they want to go to. The next bar is family choice. And then we have closest facility. So there are times when we need to go to the closest hospital. It doesn't make sense to drive by a perfectly good hospital if somebody's really in a life-threatening situation, so we'll do that. Protocols, that's another reason we go to a facility, and physician's choice. So you can see that list there. So cardiac and stroke care. So we've been fortunate to receive the American Heart Association Mission Lifeline Gold Award every year that it's been offered. We're the only one of 18 ambulance services in the United States that have met that mark. And really it's a data analysis of 9 measurements to meet in both heart attack and stroke care. So we have to work with our first responding agencies, all the hospitals in the city, the specialists within those hospitals. We try to close that gap from when people have those symptoms. We can do a lot of the stuff in the field. We can do 12-lead EKGs, so we know if somebody's having a heart attack. We can read those in the field and call for a STEMI alert at the hospital and get them into the cath lab. That's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference to them. Interestingly enough, in 2021, we led the initiative for West Fargo's designation as a North Dakota cardiac ready community. So that was a partnership with the ambulance service and the fire department and the hospitals in the region. So we talked about response times for all calls. This slide talks about response times for time-sensitive patients. So we're talking about strokes, STEMIs, which is ST, elevated myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, other critical patients, which could be an airway or sepsis, something else that would make you very sick and wind up in the ICU, or trauma patients. So not big numbers in West Fargo, fortunately, but our average response time to those time-sensitive patients was 6 minutes and 19 seconds. We do see a spike in May of 2023, and when we look into that, what we find are 5 calls that fell outside our response time goals. So we look at them, and one of them, because like I said before, we consider West Fargo anything with a West Fargo address. One of them, we were delayed by a train, so we were up in West Fargo, got stuck behind a train. There are several of them that were dispatched as non-emergencies, and then later as the dispatchers went through the EMD coding, they upgraded that, but that slows us down a little bit. And then one of them was a second truck to a scene where the first truck was already there, so it was just an additional truck, ambulance, which came from further away. So these are non-cardiac arrest, time-sensitive events. And the next slide is kind of busy. I'm going to ask Kathy to come up here. This is her project, but here's how I'll set it up. Is on the right are national numbers that we benchmark ourselves with, and on the left are West Fargo specific numbers. So, Kathy?
Thanks, Tim. So we belong to something called CARES. It's the Cardiac Registry to Enhance Survival. We've belonged to that for a number of years. What we do is international Oh, okay, I was like, what did I just hit? Sorry. International resuscitation experts developed something called the Utstein template to help create uniform reporting guidelines for clinical variables and patient outcomes in cardiac arrest, because there are several things that can affect outcomes. And this helps make sure that we're comparing little apples to apples when we're talking about different services, different cities, things like that. And they developed it to help it be a measure of system efficacy for allowing comparison of patient outcomes despite those wide variations of circumstances. So if you look on the right, for the the 2022 data, which has not, the 2023 data has not come out yet. We're expecting that in May. According to the national statistics, the median response time is 7.8 minutes, which, as Tim just showed, we're beating locally. There's a 40% of the patients in cardiac arrest received bystander CPR, and nationally, 11% had bystander applied AED, which is extremely important. If you look, and I apologize, I had a graphic to make it bigger, and I will be more prepared next time. But our West Fargo specific data is that we had bystander CPR initiated 26.7% of the time. So a little bit lower than national, but better than it had been years ago before we started the Cardiac Ready Communities Initiative. And for this past year, we didn't have any public AED use that was reported. Nationally, they report a 9.3% survival to hospital discharge. That doesn't necessarily mean that they survived or where they went once they survived, if they went to a nursing home, if they were able to resume their normal life, things like that. But 9.3 survived to be discharged from the hospital. Here in West Fargo, unofficially for 2023, we have 11.1, so we're a little bit higher. And our Utstein, so this means a bystander or a witnessed cardiac arrest with CPR performed and the first rhythm being a shockable rhythm, like by the AED. Nationally, they're reporting a 30.7% success rate, so surviving to discharge. Here in West Fargo, we are actually having 50%. And then Utstein bystander, which is that same category, but a bystander either started CPR or performed an AED. We have 100%, which is almost never heard of. But if you look, we only had 19 resuscitations attempted in West Fargo, so we have a pretty low number, and only 2 people fell into that Utstein criteria. So small numbers, so I'm guessing next year we won't have 100% either, but it's things to aim for.
So to me, there's a couple opportunities that I think we can work on as a community. And one is the CPR, bystander CPR, that we'd like to improve that, obviously, and AED use, public AED use. So there's some things, and teaching the public to do emergency care is a constant thing. We have to redo it and reinforce those notions continually. Occasionally, we have a learn CPR. What do you call that, Kathy? At the mall? Save a Life Saturday, sorry. And anybody can walk up to the booth in the mall and they'll teach them how to do CPR. So
Can you identify where the AED devices are in the city of West Fargo?
I don't believe we have that data.
The lady's coming forward.
Off the top of my head, no. All of the police departments all of the police officers carry one in their car, which is extremely important. And of course, the fire department responds with theirs as well. There are several. There is something called the Pulse Point app that the fire departments have helped get into place, and the North Dakota Department of Health is updating all of that information so that if you were to call 911 and say I think somebody's dying, the dispatcher can say, look at that Pulse Point app and say, there's a AED close to you, it's in this location, can you have someone grab it?
Was there not a statewide program that put them in schools too?
Initially, it was Cass Public Health that had an initiative, and then I'm not exactly sure who did the school initiative. But yes, there's been involvement at both the state and the county level.
I appreciate your response because I knew that the police department had them in their cars. I just wanted the public to hear it.
Oh, yes.
And when we say no AD use, it's by the public, it's not by the responders, so that's different. Thanks, Kathy. So that's my presentation. I hope it was informative for you, and I hope to be invited back again next year. We can go over 2024 data.
Well, we appreciate your service to the community, obviously, and protecting our taxpayers. I have one question for you. When you take a look at your response, let's see, pardon me, response volumes and the quantities that you had you have from January to December, and the peak was 200 in, I think, August, or probably at the fair, like you suggested. So is your 6.19 seconds with all those 1,000+ calls?
No, the 6 minutes, 19 seconds is referring to the time-sensitive calls of stroke, SEMI, critical calls like airway or trauma.
So do we have the data on what an average call in West Fargo is with the 1,000+?
That's in this slide. Let me find it for you.
I think I know which one it is, but I just want it clarified for the public.
This is all calls. This slide shows all calls. And all it's saying is, have we met our goal, yes or no? So I don't know what, and we can get an average for all calls. It's going to
Very
be
good.
much lower than 9 minutes, but this is how frequently we've met the goal of 9 minutes.
And Sanford Ambulance has 2 facilities in the city of West Fargo. Are you dispatching emergency responses from both facilities in our community?
The post, what we call Post 6, which is over by, off of 9th Street, is for our non-emergency trucks right now. So they do interfacility transfers. It's relatively close to the hospital. The 911 calls.
That's the one right behind the Element and
Yep.
the old JoJo's restaurant,
Correct.
immediately to the east, okay?
Yeah, we do send them on some emergency calls that are coded at a low level, so they probably wouldn't be going lights and sirens. It'd be low-level things like maybe to a nursing home where somebody is being referred to the emergency room from a nursing home. But they don't go on typical emergency calls. We do that from our base on Cheyenne, just south of the freeway, the one that we established a year or so ago. But we cover, at peak periods, within the whole metro area, we have 12 ambulances. 12, I had to ask, look at Chad, 12 ambulances on. So we share ambulances across and cover where there's a need. So they can go everywhere.
Very good, thank you. Commissioners, any additional questions, gentlemen? Thank you, Mr. Meyer, appreciate it. Moving on, item number 3 on the regular agenda is the Fargo-Moorhead EDC 2023 recap and key programs update. This is an informational item. We're going to call on Casey Sanders Berglund, our Economic Development Director, Manager. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner Dardis, Commissioners. Tonight I have the pleasure of welcoming both Ryan and Joy from the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC to simply give you an overview of the last year of how the partnership between not only my department, but the overall city and the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC Corporation works throughout the year. Sometimes it's nice to hear from our partners how that information flow and how we share information and connect on different levels are, as well as they'll lean into some of the data they collect, specifically leaning into the primary sector businesses that are here in West Fargo. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Good evening, Mr. Asheim, welcome. And a note to everyone, a West Fargo resident.
Proud resident.
Please continue.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Dardis and members of the commission, and thank you, Casey, for that introduction. We really do enjoy I'd say a very fruitful partnership. Casey's been a tremendous partner and resource for us, and I'll kind of go over a little bit of what we've been able to do in the last year and give kind of a little snapshot of the last 5 years. So certainly I'm not going to cover everything we do in our entire body of work at the EDC, but kind of give you some insight into some of the core functional areas and where our partnership really overlaps with Casey and the city of West Fargo. So our organization, maybe just as some context and reference point, we're a nonprofit. We're publicly and privately funded to support and catalyze economic development, particularly focused on primary sector business growth and expansion. So primary sector being any business that adds value or knowledge to a good or service and then sells that outside of the trade area. So primary sector companies by nature have most of their customers are located in other markets, so they're bringing new wealth into local markets. So that local wealth then supports the other non-primary sector companies. So about 5% of an economy is typically made up of primary sector businesses. So I think I'm running the deck here. A little insight into 2023 and the last 5 years. So we kind of look at the last 5 years as kind of our body of work because as I'm sure you're aware, level of activity can change from year to year. You can have a very busy year and you can have a slower year the next year. So we think it's helpful to look at any activity over a course of time. So in the last 5 years, from 2019 to 23, our organization worked, and this is just West Fargo numbers. So 23 successful projects in West Fargo. And for reference, a project, what we consider to be a project is any primary sector business that we support with an expansion, with growth, with investment, with new job creation, additional square footage, might be new equipment, might be a new building, might be an addition. We consider that to be a project, helping them to access more sales and hire more people and or do more with fewer resources. So those 23 projects represent about 18% of our total projects. And just, for comparison, the city of West Fargo represents about 15% of the total MSA population. And we currently have 4 active projects in our pipeline. In terms of the impact on an economic front, those 23 projects represent 224 direct jobs, 270,000 square feet of new or utilized square footage, and $57.4 million in capital investment. And, just in terms of projects, some of those include names like Ave Seed, which we provided a growth initiative fund. I'll talk about our growth initiative fund later. Loan for and Wisegram, who is a great West Fargo manufacturer that we've had a lot of support through our growth initiative fund over the last number of years. And just for a little more reference, that's 5-year numbers. Last year, we had 18 total projects. 3 of those were West Fargo, a couple of the companies I mentioned, which is about 70% of our total activity last year. Our BRE program, so Business Retention Expansion. When we talk about our BRE program, this is really kind of very core fundamental economic development work. This is kind of what is the granular substance around which most economic development organizations affect economic impact in their community. So 75% of most economic development organizations, their activity is from local companies that are expanding, right? Local companies tend to look at their market first before looking at opportunities in other markets. So doing these annual visits, these strategic visits, is a big key part of what we do. We try to have a goal of 150 of these strategic visits a year. We were fortunate enough to bring Joey Ness, who's our VP of Business Development, on last year. Our organization, this market's grown. When I say market, I'm talking about Cass County and Clay County as our MSA, Metropolitan Statistic Area. Our market's tripled in size. We've gone from around $6 billion in economic output in the early 2000s to nearly $20 billion in economic output last year. In that time, the EDC has added one person. That was Joey last year. So our labor force in that time's also tripled in size. So, or I should say it's increased by 39%, which is triple the national average of 13%. So when people are saying nobody wants to work, I say we've just been adding jobs at a faster rate than we've grown our labor force. So BRE is really important work. We partnered a lot with Casey last year to hit as many of West Fargo companies as we could as part of that strategic outreach. I know that the mayor was supportive in adding his name and helping us through letter to get in front of some West Fargo companies. So what do those BREs allow us to do? They allow us to determine if a company might be expanding, if they're considering it, and if they are, can we help induce them to decide to make that investment locally rather than either not make the investment or make that investment somewhere else. So this is regional data. So this is the entire metropolitan statistical area. We did 122 BRE visits. We actually had over 150 total visits. We count startup visits that my colleague John does. So he meets with early stage companies. It might be one entrepreneur. Very different set of questions than with a company like WiseGram, which has dozens, if not hundreds, of employees. Of those 122, I'll just highlight a few of the data items here. We had, that represents 1.2 or 1,200 open positions. That's about 10 open positions per company. Those are jobs that those companies are actively trying to find people to fill. And of those, it also, oh, yeah. So I'm sorry. 84 of those 122 businesses were planning potential expansion. So pretty significant number. That's 69%. We compare our data against national numbers, and those numbers tend to be closer to 40 or 50% of companies planning to expand. So now we'll take a quick look at West Fargo's numbers. And I'm not going through every item here, but happy to provide some additional context to that or answer any questions to any of the commissioners offline. West Fargo's numbers. So we track approximately 46 West Fargo companies that are considered primary sector. Our total market is between 400 and 500. We say approximately because there are new companies that are coming online every day, and there are companies like Quality Meats that have been operating for 60 plus years, and it was only a few years ago we met with them, talked about their market, where they're selling the products, and we were able to work with them to go to the state and get primary sector certified. So we're often finding these hidden gems that we didn't know they were primary sector, they didn't know they were primary sector, and so we add those to our list. So of those 46 companies approximately, we met with 18 of them. And 9 of those had indicated they were considering expansion, or there might be an expansion on the horizon. So about 50% of those companies. And that 18 visits represents 39% of those 46 West Fargo companies. I think another interesting stat is 48 job openings amongst those 18 companies, which is a 2.6 open position rate compared to the 10 across the larger metro area. So just a few tidbits of information. I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means in terms of some of the expansion that these companies are considering. So of those 9 of those 18 companies that have indicated that they may be considering expansion, that represents $38 million in capital investment, 78 jobs, new jobs, and 190,000 square feet. That doesn't mean every one of those companies is going to do an expansion, but it means we have the opportunity to have a deeper engagement and talk with them and see, understand if they have capital needs, do they have workforce needs, is there some support we can provide working with Casey to help those companies make a decision to invest locally. And then that's a picture of Joey with an interesting company, Protesthetics, which is creating orthotics and prosthetics for people and children using enhanced 3D printing techniques. A little bit more about that BRE data. 61% of all of the companies interviewed in West Fargo indicated there are barriers to growth in the company, in the community. 50% are experiencing recruitment issues, and 21% of the companies shared reasons for not expanding in the community. Those are all really good numbers if we're comparing across the metro and across the nation. The 61% of companies noting barriers to growth, as is probably no surprise, most of those are around workforce, and workforce in particular, availability and affordability. 50% of companies experiencing recruiting issues. That number was 66% at the metro-wide level. So just a little insight into maybe companies in West Fargo are weathering some of those challenges a little better. And then companies indicating a reason to not expand. Again, this could be, hey, we're limited by workforce. Maybe it's a logistic thing. Maybe it's we have to be closer to the middle of the country. So there could be a number of factors why that might be the case. And that number is 25% across the metro. So again, a little bit better in West Fargo. Document-ready sites. So Casey had mentioned, and the agenda, I think, indicates we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the tools and programs that we manage. One of them is a document-ready site program. So if you're familiar with shovel-ready sites or certified sites, so this is really a program where you've worked with landowners, you've worked with developers, you work with utilities, worked with cities, and engineers to understand everything about a site in terms of where the utilities are, what the geotechnical studies look like, environmental impact studies, so that when you do have a prospect, a client, maybe it's a national project, maybe it's a global site selector that's interested in our market, or we're out recruiting for and marketing our sites, we can help them come to a decision quickly. And we can that's either to do a project here or not to do it here. And if it's not to do it here, we all want to get to that decision quickly and save everybody time and energy and money. So this, we've currently got 4 document-ready sites in our program. One is in Moorhead, the McCarr Industrial Park. The other is Veterans Industrial, which is just north of the Horse Park by Mid-America Steel. Dakota Commerce Center North, which is north of Amazon, and Crossroads, which is a new commercial development at the crossroads of I-94 and I-29. We've certainly had discussions about some West Fargo properties, most recently talking about the Lagoon site. There's a number of things about that area that makes it attractive, and so we've got a keen eye on that, and obviously would love to see that as a candidate for our document-ready site in the future. A little bit about some of our marketing and promotion of those sites. Involves attending site selector events. We were at one about a year ago in San Antonio. I'll be going to the one in Nashville here in the end of or the beginning of April. We also do digital marketing. We're in a system called LOIS, which is Location One Information Services. It's a national platform, and they have a database called Lasso, where if anyone wants to search sites by acreage or other certain criteria, our sites will pop up. And then I should mention, we did meet with one of our site consultants who we used to build this program, met with city staff to talk about the Lagoon site. So we want to be sure that we're connecting your team and your staff with consultants who do this for a living, and they understand what projects and what site selectors are looking for, so that we can position the community to be responsive to market demands and what the market's asking for. I mentioned LOIS. This is a mapping tool, so we can have properties in here that are represented. We have a partnership with ComEx, so any sites that they have listed on their multiple listing service gets pulled through here, and we've got other economic reports that can be pulled through, traffic counts. So if you've got a client or a user, this is embedded in West Fargo's website. So you've taken our lowest system and rebranded it and embedded it into your system. There's a layering system, so if someone wants to click on the Enterprise Zone or click on the Renaissance Zone, they can do that, and they can search for properties and buildings that fall within those areas as well. I mentioned our Growth Initiative Fund, so this is a economic development program to lend funds to primary sector companies. It was capitalized in 1994. You can see some of the funds that West Fargo contributed towards that. The fund was capitalized at an original amount of just close to 7.3 million. West Fargo put in about 4.5% of that. We've since grown that in the 30 years to just over 8.5 million. So we've added about $1 million in interest income and other fees that have grown the size of that. In that time period, we have done 292 loans. 66 of those have been in West Fargo. I'm pleased to report that's 23% of the entire loan portfolio. The fund is currently around $1 million in undeployed, which is available capital. The remainder is about $7.5 million is in loans receivable. So when we do make a commitment, it is for 5 to 7 years, and so that capital gets tied up. It's a revolving loan fund, so when those loans do mature, we get those funds back to reinvest. But there's a long lead time that ties those up while that capital is working. I should say our loan losses are tremendously low. So we haven't seen erosion of the fund. That's why we've been able to build it up over time as well. In 2023, just for reference, we did 11 loans for around 1.1 million in activity. We currently have around $1 million in that loan fund that's not obligated or deployed. And so if we have a year like we had last year, or the last few years, we can expect to see that loan fund be completely exhausted, and we will have to put a halt on new projects. So it's something we don't want to see. We're currently in conversations to find ways to recapitalize that and add additional capital so we can keep supporting primary sector businesses. So I will end there, and thank you for your time, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4 in the regular agenda is A23-26, the Weary Residence Subdivision. Aaron Nelson, Planning Director for the City of West Fargo, will be presenting. And the purpose of the discussion is to approval of a final plot and conditional use permit for a non-farm residential use. Good evening, Mr. Nelson, and welcome.
Good evening, President Dardis and Commissioners. So as was just mentioned, item number 4, Weary Residence Subdivision, is a request for final plat approval and approval of CUP or conditional use permit for non-farm single-family residential use. The purpose of this application is to allow for the construction of a new single-family home. The subject property includes 2 existing parcels totaling about 7 acres of land located just east of the City of West Fargo Airport. I've got an aerial image here to kind of illustrate the location of the property here. The property is adjacent to, but just outside of the city's corporate limits, within the city's area of extraterritorial jurisdiction, and is also within the A agricultural zoning district. The western parcel, it's hard to see on this map, I think the parcel lines are missing, but going down to the zoning map here, you'll see the subject property consists of 2 parcels. The western parcel is currently vacant, and the eastern parcel actually has 2 existing single-family homes on it today. The applicant intends to demolish the older of the 2 homes on the eastern parcel and replace it with a new home on the western parcel, essentially having 1 home on each of the 2 tracts of land there. Let's scroll down to the proposed site plan here, where you can kind of see existing home in the northeast corner, existing older home on the east side, the eastern home here, where my cursor is, would be demolished, and a new single-family home would be built on the west side of the subject property here. The proposed subdivision would plat the 2 existing parcels into 2 legal lots, both of which would be about 3.5 acres in size. Public land dedication is typically required at the time of plating. However, given the nature of the subject property here in the extraterritorial area, this area is not serviced by city utilities, and so the public dedication is proposed to be deferred until such time that the property is rezoned, replatted, or otherwise redeveloped in the future. Staff would note that the subject property is located within the 100-year floodplain and that all future construction is subject to all relevant federal, state, and local flood protection requirements, including the city's flood protection ordinances. Additionally, the applicant is aware that access to the subject property may be impacted during times of flooding. Scroll back up to the aerial image here. Access to the property is via 19th Avenue Northwest, via a private access easement located north-south along this long driveway here. So that road does or has the potential to flood during flood events, and the applicant is aware of that, and that is identified within the conditional use permit agreement as such. Overall, staff finds the proposed conditional use permit and subdivision to be consistent with city plans and ordinances as outlined in the staff report, as the proposal has the effect of basically replacing a non-conforming home with a conforming home. With that, the recommended action tonight is to approve the conditional use permit for non-farm residential use and the proposed Weary residence subdivision, as well as the accompanying CUP agreement and public dedication deferment agreement, which is included in your meeting packet tonight. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Questions, commissioners? I followed this when it came through planning and zoning. Has there been a resolution with regarding to the public land dedication to the parks?
Yes, so I'll scroll down to that. So typically, land dedication is required at the time of platting. However, in this case, this area is quite a ways away from any sort of urbanized development. Additionally, it's outside of city limits and there is no access to city utilities. And so the proposal here tonight is to defer the dedication of the public dedication. Public dedication can take place in the form of a land dedication, or it can take the form of a fee in lieu of land dedication. In both cases, though, that would be deferred until such time that the property is either replatted, rezoned, or otherwise redeveloped beyond just 2 single-family homes. That language is included in the deferment agreement in the packet here tonight.
Thank you for working through that issue. Any other questions, commissioners? This is an actionable item.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Moved and seconded to approve the final plat and conditional use permit for a non-farm residential use for the Weary Residence subdivision. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Item number 5 is a residential recycling contract with Waste Management. We call on Mr. Matt Anbick, Director of Public Works for the City of West Fargo. Good evening, Mr. Anbick, and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner President and Commissioners. Tonight, we do have that new contract with Waste Management for residential recycling. Just to give a little background on this. In 2016 is when the city began using Waste Management as their recycling contractor. That first contract was a 5-year contract and it was done in April of 2021. At that time, we had extended a new 3-year contract, which is up now May 1st of 2024. Knowing this was coming, we met with Waste Management beginning late last summer, worked on kind of the normal terms and worked to an agreement with them. And then it's been going back and forth between making sure the city attorney and their attorneys have looked everything over. It seems like we came to with a pretty mutual beneficial agreement this time. Some of the highlights of this contract, it's a 2-year contract with 2 1-year extensions. Each year, on the each year anniversary, it is at a 5% increase. That's kind of been standard with Waste Management for all their other contracts, what they've been doing because of the inflation rate in the last few years. In 2024, if this is approved going forward, we will go from $7.18 a can, what we pay right now to Waste Management, to 705. That's a decrease of 13 cents. I did have a typo in here. I did have a 0 in the wrong spot. I apologize for that. So it is a 13-cent decrease per each can. Are the extra recycling cans that are out there, there are 22 of them. There would be no change for that in 2024. Our drop sites for the dumpster pickup, that'll be no change as well for 2024. One other change is they do use their transfer station. We do pack their trailers for them. And we will be getting $60 per ton tipping fee, which is actually an increase of $44.80 per ton on this new contract. Looking forward, the total contract cost in 2023, it was $1,076,892. With this new contract, it'll go down to $924,802. So it's about decrease in about $152,000 with this new contract. Kind of going through this too, we did look into if there were any other avenues, opportunities with other contractors to maybe go out for bid. Looking around prior to negotiations, there was just nobody around that would be able to handle the volume we do take in West Fargo. And going through negotiations with Waste Management, they're very good to deal with. They've been a good partner for us for some time. I guess request that you approve this contract moving forward, and I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Anvik? Anyone?
No.
All right. This is an actionable item to act on the contract.
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the residential recycling contract with Waste Management as presented by Mr. Anvik. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Anvik.
Thank you.
I believe the next item is yours as well. Item number 6 is the purchase of a budgeted 2024 rear load sanitation truck. Mr. Anvik.
Thank you, President, Commissioners. We are kind of trying to upgrade our fleet. Our Unit 408 is really coming to the end of its life. It's 11 years old now. I believe we were trying to actually replace this one about 2 years ago. We had a truck in the pipeline to replace this about 2 years ago, which got canceled, and we just kind of let that one go. And we had it in the budget for this year. The price came in this year. I just gave you the revised numbers this morning as well for what I had before that we got. That was actually $24 cheaper than what I had on the previous memo. But the source oil price was $278,975.56. We do get a trade-in value of $15,000 for the unit we do have. So the total purchase price would be the $263,975.56, which is just over $6,000 below our budget. This will be purchased, it was budgeted in 2024 and approved with the commission. And then this is just coming out of the sanitation fund as well. It is a local vendor that will be receiving this truck from, and we should have this one in our fleet by August of 2024. I'll stand for any questions.
My understanding is the $263,000, the standing balance in that account is about $2 million. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Very good. So totally fundable. All right. Commissioners, any questions?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George, second. It's been moved and seconded to purchase the budgeted 2024 rear load sanitation truck as presented this evening for $263,975.56 as outlined by Mr. Anvik. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anvick. Item number 7 is a request for a budget amendment to cover cybersecurity insurance. It's, the purpose of this discussion is to amend the IT budget to purchase cyber insurance. We call on Heider Howitzer, Director of of IT. Good evening, Mr. Howitzer. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm here for a budget amendment for the IT department. In the past, we did not have any insurance, and we still don't. I'm not sure what the history is behind it and why, but as for right now, we did work with the state IT to work on the prerequisites, and we got the approval, and we are eligible for insurance right now. So I was wondering if it's possible to get the budget amended so we can cover that item. If you see in the financial side of it, we have 5 options from 1 to 5 million. We have the premiums listed as well. I did check with the neighboring cities and of our size, and they are running between 2 and 3 million for coverage. So I wanted to see what you guys think we should get.
And you're recommending,
I'm recommending about either 2 or 3 million. 3 million would be a better number for us. From past experience working with the incident response teams for the ransomware, it is very chaotic, and it's a resource depleting event. So I would recommend between $3 million would be a good number to go with.
being this is an amendment to the IT 2024 budget, I need a dollar amount between 2 and 3 million. What is that premium charge?
That would be a $40,060 a year.
Mr. Scott?
Good evening. Just to help out here a little bit, the bottom of the cover sheet that Hyder has prepared does provide the premiums for each of the levels of coverage. So ranging from $23,000 to $55,000 a year, depending on a 1 to 5 year. So,
Commissioner Olson.
Question for Mr. Scott. If we would amend the budget, where would the funds come from?
Currently, our liability insurance comes out of the non-departmental budget, so it could come out of there. I know the way that Hyder structured this agenda item is to amend the IT budget, and that is certainly an option too. So, I guess my recommendation would be to keep it in the non-departmental, which is consistent with our other insurance premiums.
And that balance will cover this $40,000 if we go with the $3 million coverage?
Yes.
So we wouldn't have to basically amend the budget then for IT. But would we have to amend the budget for the non-departmental?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner George?
So this is something I know nothing about, and so I'm trying to read in the description what this actually covers, and it says it covers expenses related to data breaches such as forensic investigations, legal fees, citizen notifications, reputations management. You're suggesting it's 3 million. I'm just wondering, is that, I mean, do we have that much where it would cost us that much versus the 1 million? I guess, I mean, I don't know. I'm just confused. Help me to understand why we need 3 million in coverage.
For sure. So this would be to bring a forensic team. We bring vendors to help us rebuild. So this is basically in an event that something would happen, God forbid. And we don't have to lose hardware, but if we need the hardware, we're going to have to buy it ourselves. And at the same time, when we rack the expenses from bringing an actual team to come in and help us isolate, rebuild, reconfigure everything, you would rack up pretty quickly that number. And then on top of it would be the forensic team, which is the bigger part of this. And then you have the recommendations of what you need to purchase afterwards. So let's say they would say we need to get maybe a third-party company that would be working with us to monitor all the data 24/7. And then they would pay for that as well. And that's where this 3 million would come in. Instead of us paying it, we would, obviously, they would cover it for us.
Sorry, I was just going to say a quick follow-up question. I think there's been some big businesses in the news that have had data breaches. Is that why this is coming forward then at this time?
Yeah, it's, there's been an influx in data breaches, and it's getting close to home. So it's very important to have it. I think it would be better for us to pay the premium than paying from our reserve to pay for an incident like that.
Thank you.
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Commissioner George, I've seen clients that have had data breaches, and you're absolutely correct. The forensic team, some of the hourly rates they charge can be $600-700 an hour for each person, if not more. And it, depending upon the nature and the type of the data breach, they can spend a lot of time. So even a small data breach can result in, close to $1 million. And it's insurance that's really important to have as any type of organization, especially a public organization in which you have utility accounts, you have things that are subject to different types of attacks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioner Olson.
Just for example, Moorhead State University was hacked, and they've been down for nearly a month, going on 2 months now with some of their departments. So they had nothing. They couldn't teach, they couldn't show grades, all that kinds of stuff. So if that would, like Mr. Shockley said, if that happened to us, we couldn't collect money for our utility bills. We couldn't send out bills. We couldn't make a payment for, as possible. We couldn't purchase anything, all that kinds of stuff. So, and who knows how long it would take for us to rebuild it. So
Okay.
I think it's a good thing to have.
One thing to add, sorry, Commissioner George, that 3 million would probably add a ransomware if we have to pay one, and that would cover it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor,
Commissioner Simmons.
I'm sorry, if there are no other questions, I'll make a motion to approve the amendment to the budget and for the 40,000, whatever it is.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve the $40,000 expenditure for insurance for cybersecurity. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. We have a motion and a second to purchase cybersecurity insurance at the $40,000 level. Excuse me, I'm scrolling back through. I was looking for something else. And that is,
$3 million.
$3 million.
thank you, $3 million. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Olson?
Just for clarification, which budget are we actually going to amend? Is it the IT budget, or should it be the insurance, the non-departmental?
Non-departmental.
Non-departmental, okay.
That's the intention of the motion, so I'd ask, is that acceptable to the second?
Yep.
Being that's been clarified, non-departmental budget. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Howitzer. Item number 8 is project number 2282, concrete pavement repair. We call on Mr. Dan Hansen, city engineer. The purpose of this discussion this evening is to accept the bids and award a contract. Good evening, Mr. Hansen. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. This is for our annual concrete pavement repair where we go around town and we fix panels that have been cracked and broken and need to get our public transportation system continue to make it functional. We had a virtual bid opening that was conducted on February 22nd, 2024, and we had 5 proposals that were received. Tyzac Concrete Incorporated was the lowest bidder for their amount of $617,105.91. The 2022 CIP budget did budget $1 million for this project. There was less work that we had anticipated for this year. We anticipate there might be a little bit extra for next year. But for this purposes, for the purposes here, the numbers that we got, and Tyzac has been the contractor that we've had doing these repairs over the last couple summers. We've had very good luck with them. They're a good qualified contractor, and I would recommend that the commission accept the bids and award the contract to Tyzac Concrete Incorporated in their bid amount of $617,105.91. And I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Commissioner Hanson? Commissioners?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve 2282 concrete pavement repair, accept the bid of $617,105. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve this item number 8, project number 2282. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Item number 9, again, we're going to call on Mr. Dan Hanson, our city engineer. It's an improvement district number 1337, Phase 2, the Wilds 21st edition, for park improvements. The purpose of the discussion is to accept bids and award a contract. Mr. Hanson, please.
Thank you again, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. This project is work to be completed within a neighborhood park within the Wilds 21st edition. This was always something that was planned, and this work that we're going to be doing was originally intended to be change ordered into Dakota Underground's contract that we had with them. The work became they weren't able to do that because it became late in the year, and they didn't want to hold their contract bond open for that size of a project over a winter just to complete this work in the springtime. So we worked with the consultant and the park district to bid this work out, and the work would consist of some sidewalks, some playground equipment, and some park amenities. To pay for this, there is some cash in lieu that was paid for by the developer because of the planning and the process for it. So included in this bid is playground equipment, but I want to point out that the cash in lieu funds would be paying for that playground equipment, which was always the intent. And so we would use that cash in lieu, and the remaining balance of what would be owed to the contractor and consultant would be included in the 1337 improvement district. And so there's a lot of information there. We did receive 2 bids, and Border States Paving was the low bidder in the amount of $182,925.35. The engineer's estimate was, with 10% contingencies, was $200,000. So we were very close to what the engineer's estimate was for that. So with that, I would recommend that the commission accept the bids and direct the execution of the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. I have a motion and a second to approve to accept the bids and award a contract for projects number 1337, Phase 2 at the Wilds 21st edition. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Item number 10. The item of discussion is the revisit of a campground ordinance within an agricultural district. We're going to call on Aaron Nelson, our planning director for the city of West Fargo. Welcome back.
Thank you. So at your last meeting, at the February 20th, 2024 meeting, the City Commission voted to reconsider a previously proposed zoning ordinance amendment relating to the permitting of campgrounds as a conditional use within the agricultural zoning district. To aid in commission discussion here tonight in terms of the revisiting of that discussion, staff has prepared a cover memo here included in your packet, which just provides a brief, kind of abbreviated outline of kind of past discussions on this topic matter, as well as an overview of the proposed amendment, which I can talk through here, and then some actions to consider here. So in terms of a quick kind of get you guys back up to speed in terms of where things left off and how this all started. Back in June 6th of 2022, the Red River Valley Fair Association made a request to the City Commission to allow, they were looking to expand their campgrounds at the fairgrounds. City Commission at that time voted to have the Fairgrounds Association host 2 public hearings or public meetings to gain some comments and some feedback from the general public, which the Red River Valley Fairgrounds Association did. Eventually, the City Commission directed staff to work with the Red River Valley Fairgrounds Association on a zoning ordinance amendment. That amendment, the proposed amendment, went to the Planning and Zoning Commission September 13th of 2022, and then went on to the City Commission for first reading of that ordinance in September 19th of 2022. I believe that first reading of the ordinance was recommended for approval on a 3-2 vote, and then the subsequent meeting, October 3rd, 2022, the Commission voted 2-2 on a motion to approve the second reading, and so that second reading of the ordinance ultimately failed for lack of a majority. And so fast forward to your last meeting, the Commission voted to revisit this item here today. And so just a quick summary of what the proposed amendment is. I will quickly note that also included, or as an attachment to that memo, is the packet material from that October 3rd, 2022 meeting, which provides a lot more detailed information in terms of the proposed ordinance. But in terms of a high-level summary, the proposed ordinance would essentially add campgrounds to the list of conditional uses that are permitted within, or that would be permitted within the A agricultural zoning district. Campgrounds would only be allowed upon approval of a conditional use permit application. They would be required to be located outside of city limits within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. They would be required to be at least 500 feet from any residentially zoned zoning districts, and they would also be required to have an on-site manager. As with any conditional use permit process, the Commission or the city is allowed to place additional conditions on any approval of any conditional use permit based on the specifics of the proposal. And so it is important to note that this proposed amendment would apply citywide. This proposed amendment does not grant anybody, including the Red River Valley Fairgrounds, with any sort of approval to expand a campground. This just simply creates a process or an opportunity for somebody to apply to do so. And so lastly included in the memo is just some actions for consideration here. There's 2 options that are kind of laid out here. Since it has been quite a while since this was last discussed, it may be worthwhile to have an additional public hearing on this matter. And so if that's the direction the City Commission would like to go, you could direct staff to advertise for a public hearing to take place as soon as April 1st, 2024, which is that first meeting in April. Alternatively, you could essentially just pick up right where you left off and reconsider action here tonight. So ultimately, I'll leave that up to the Commission, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners? Commissioner Olson?
I'd like to ask Commissioner Simmons why we brought this forth after nearly a year and a half.
Commissioner
Sure.
Simmons?
Well, yep, when I voted no on this one, I had said at that time that I was going to bring this back when I got more clarity in reference to our extraterritorial area. I am concerned, and this just isn't about the Red River Valley Fair, and for the record, nobody has asked me to bring this forward. I've done this because I said before I'm done, I was going to bring this forward. I am concerned with our extraterritorial area, and I would like to have some clarity as far as what can happen out there. And this is in reference to, again, nobody can put up a campground, just go do it. But at least everybody has an opportunity to come to P&Z and come to the Commission if they chose, if we wanted a regular campground somewhere. We have no campground other than a small one at the Red River Valley Fair. And that's why I'm bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions of Mr. Nelson? Commissioner George?
So as far as the campground goes, that's something, again, like I've said in the past, like I really am an advocate for camping, and I actually voted against it because of the issue with that neighborhood in the Red River Valley Fair, and I had some concerns. Looking at this in the amendment, I do feel like it might have addressed the concerns that we had as far as on the no and why I voted no. And so I guess I'm feeling like I am open to these proposed amendments based on them addressing the concerns that I had initially. And I'm glad you asked Mark that question too, because I had the same question. So,
Mayor?
Thank you. Commissioner?
So just for clarification, this does not approve any expansion to the existing campground. It just makes that if anybody else wanted to put up a new campground somewhere in our extraterritorial area, they would have to come in and apply and get a permit and things like that. So it doesn't touch anything that what the Red River Valley Fair wanted to do back in 2022.
Correct, because the fairgrounds is not in the city of West Fargo, it's in our extraterritorial,
Right.
and that's why we're addressing it, and West Fargo has a 2-mile extraterritorial.
And even though they have a campground right now, they would not have to come in and ask for a conditional use permit, am I correct, Mr. Nelson? Unless they wanted to expand.
Correct. This would have essentially no effect on the current campground as it exists today. That would continue to be grandfathered as existing. It's only if they ever wanted to expand, if this ordinance were approved, they would need to come in and apply for a conditional use permit and go through that process.
Additional questions, please, Commissioner? Follow up.
So to what Commissioner Simmons' concern is, as we see the diversion being completed quite quickly, it's possible somewhere west of here, there could be somebody thinking, I may want to put up a campground out here. They would have to come in and ask get authorization to do so by going through this process.
As long as they're within the 2 miles of the incorporated lines of the city of West Fargo presently.
Yep.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified. That's probably your reason why, Commissioner Simmons, right?
That is exactly the reason why.
Okay. We were all curious.
Any
Oh, yeah, I know.
Any additional comments or questions for Mr. Nelson? As outlined in the action considerations that Mr. Nelson put forward for us this evening, we have one of, actually 2 options there that we could possibly do. So I leave that to your discretion, Commissioners.
Does any commissioners have thoughts on that process?
Say again, please.
Does any other commissioners have a thought on that process as far as what they want to do?
Commissioners, you can address the Commissioner Simmons directly if you'd like.
What is your take on it, Mark?
Well, we've gone through the public hearings. I'm all for if we want to do another one, it will be, I'm assuming it will be the same individuals that will come. And I mean, it doesn't matter to me really. I just want to get this done. I think that it's advantageous for our community to have some protection. And to me, this is the way to do it.
But
I would highly recommend, being that we held 2 public hearings previously, the commissioners were there at those public hearings, held at the fairgrounds, and they were not well attended. So I would, and so, to Commissioner George's point, those residents that are to the east of there, the homeowners, they think that this had been resolved. So I would highly recommend that we have another public hearing if we're going to reconsider this. Commissioner Olson.
I'm fine with that.
But I don't think that we need to have the fairgrounds conduct a public hearing, because this isn't addressing an expansion of their current
I agree.
campground.
I agree. It shouldn't.
This is just I would have the public hearing here during a regular commission meeting.
Totally agree.
Okay. I don't want to put the burden on the Red River Valley Fairgrounds to
No.
conduct a hearing, because the expansion is not part of the discussion at all.
Correct.
Okay.
I agree.
Agreed.
I would make that motion then that we have a public hearing and then, I don't know if we can vote on it after that or we have to have time go by. I'm not sure of that protocol, excuse me.
So the proposed amendment is to add campgrounds to the list of conditional uses that would be allowable within an A agricultural zoning district, and to direct staff to have a public hearing to take place at the April 1st, 2024 City Commission meeting. Is that acceptable to the motion, the
Yes,
original motion?
yes,
And the
yes,
second?
sir.
I'll second it.
We have a second. We have Commissioner Olson as a second. That's the intent, Commissioners. Any questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 11 is a discussion on the cable franchise agreement. We call on Mr. John Shockley, City Attorney for the City of West Fargo. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. My understanding at the last budget hearings for 2024 that occurred last fall, the decision was made to increase the cable franchise fees.
Excuse me, John, a little closer to the microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Can you hear me better?
Better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. My understanding was at the last round of budget hearings in 2023 for the 2024 year, the decision was made, the policy decision was made to increase the annual franchise fee from 3% to 4% for the cable franchise. You currently have two cable companies operating within city limits, Cable One and Midco. Under the franchise agreements, the city can go ahead and increase the franchise fee from 3% to 4% by sending a notice. I included the draft notices and the proposed amendments to the franchise agreements. You can, by federal law, you can only go to 5%. So 4% is clearly under the federal law requirements. And so if that is the direction given by the city commission, you would vote tonight to increase the cable, send the notice and increase the cable franchise fee from 3% to 4%. And once again, it's my understanding that this was included within the 2024 budget. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Olson has a question for you.
Just point of clarification, is it still Cable One or is it Sparklight, their new name? To make it sure that we get it all right.
Yeah, we'll probably go through and amend that when we get their official response back.
Okay.
Currently the notice we have to send, it uses the current cable franchise agreement, and they may want just a simple amendment to change that along with the increase in the fee.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. You took the question I had right out of my mouth because I see the check when it comes in every month and it's by Sparklight. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Shockley regarding the franchise agreement changes, the amendment?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the cable franchise agreement amendment as presented in ordinance number 1215. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 12 is the city administrator's report. We call on Mr. Dustin Scott, city administrator.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. I really just have a couple items for you tonight. One, just an update. We will be holding interviews for our senior director positions on Monday afternoon. Commissioners George and Anderson are on that hiring committee along with myself, and we will be asking department heads to participate as well. So, any questions on that? And then finance director search. We have had 7 applications so far. Actually, just had a couple more today. So, looking to have hopefully a few more by the end of the week. There should be at least a couple there worth interviewing, so, but again, we're optimistic that we get a few more by the end of the week and can hopefully move forward with interviews by mid-month. So that's really all I have. I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions, commissioners? Do you have any correspondence for us, Mr. Scott?
No correspondence.
All right. With that, we move into non-agenda items. Commissioners, do any of you have an item that you'd like to bring forward this evening? Commissioner George.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to take the next few minutes to talk about a really wonderful business here in West Fargo called Shea West. This story of Shea West started many years ago. I believe the first vote to approve this business happened in February of 2020, a few months before I was elected. This business got approved for a PUD, or Planned Urban Development, which is basically a conditional use where it's only approved for their business. It's not going to be approved for other commercial businesses, but just their business. This business happens to be in a majority residential neighborhood. But from my understanding, planning and zoning has talked about eventually turning the Cheyenne corridor into more commercial type properties, and we're very much excited about Shea West moving into this location. With the original plans that Shea West had presented, there was a access point going across 40th Avenue into their business with a double driveway, and excuse me if I don't present this exactly correct, but the original plans did present access into their business, which I believe they felt might work and might be suitable for the business that had been presented. With the upcoming, spring, summer busy season with coming up with the, being a garden center, they needed to work quickly to get their business up and running to make the best use of the season. And I think maybe some things got overlooked as far as access to their business and parking to their business. And there has now since been pile upon pile of problems that has resulted from Shea West not having adequate access and adequate parking. So this has become a detriment to this really wonderful business in our community. And they are having a loss of business because there's no place for people to park. On the other hand, we also have the residents in that neighborhood which have a gravel road, and then people are forced to park on their gravel road, which is maintained by the people in that neighborhood. And so, of course, they're upset because the road is getting damaged and they don't like people parking on the road. So we have an issue, and then we have the city also that, trying to come up with a compromise as far as the access to this business has become very, very, very challenging. And I will be honest, the owner of Shea West, who is here tonight, Mrs. Jody Callis, she is a wonderful, wonderful resident of West Fargo. She does so many incredible things for this community. People love her business, and she has the support of the community like I have never seen before. She has put a call out on social media, and it has gained traction, like hundreds and hundreds of shares, and the outcry has been incredible from the emails and the phone calls I have received to the comments, the media, and I believe it is our responsibility as a commission to help this business, to help this person in our community. When I became elected, it wasn't just to vote yay or nay on sewer and street projects. It was to help people in our community and to make a difference. And this is a situation where I feel like this is a platform where we can do something. Now, I don't know exactly what the answer is yet, but here's what I'm going to propose. I know Mrs. Callis, I have spoke with her, and she has told me there have been meetings with city staff, and they have not come up with a solution. But she was not involved in those meetings, which I don't think is right, nor were any of the commissioners. What I would propose is if we could put together a group with engineering, public works, administration. Mrs. Callis needs to be part of those meetings as well as a commissioner, I believe. And I believe that commissioner should be Robin Anderson. I know he supports Shea West, and he has the engineering portfolio, so I think he would be the best fit to be on that. And can we maybe have a fresh start with fresh ideas and maybe come up with new ideas? And I know it's frustrating on both sides, but as a commissioner, I believe it is our responsibility to step up and to make a difference and to help her out, because that's my reason for being here, is to help her. And so my proposal is to put together that, and maybe they can come up with some ideas to present to us as a commission. So that's what I'm asking for, is if we can do something to help her.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Commissioners, do we have a consensus on this non-agenda item? You have a unanimous consent. Commissioner Simmons, we can't
Yes.
see, we can't see you shaking your head, yes or no, so
Yeah, yes,
you're okay with it? Good. So we have a unanimous.
Emily has a question.
For 5 minutes, can I actually get a vote on this?
You asked for a vote? Okay, just a moment, please. First of all, I need to know that, Commissioner George has suggested you as holding planning and zoning as a commissioner portfolio, that you serve on this. Are you accepting of that?
I will
your schedule
accept.
provide us? Will your schedule allow it?
Staff knows what my schedule is like, but yes. It will,
Apparently,
yes, I
Commissioner.
accept.
For the record, for the media, Commissioner George certainly didn't ask him before the commission meeting. So we're good there. Anyway, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner George, for your meeting with Mrs. Callis and having this discussion. So that will be at the discretion then of Commissioner Anderson and Mr. Scott as the lead of our administrative and our department heads for those conversations. And as per Commissioner George's motion that she's soon going to make will also include the owner, Mrs. Callis, as well. Commissioner.
First, I'd like to make sure Mrs. Callis is okay with that suggestion.
Commissioners, I want to apologize for any of the weekend's festivities. I'm not sure how else to say that. Mandy has said that there have been some hostile things said and spoken. I want you to know that that was not the intent of the post, nor did was it intended to have a negative or aggressive impact on your weekend. I'm on my last attempt before the commission to do a change that can make or break our business. I've tried and failed several times. This is something that means a lot to me. And I appreciate the support and I appreciate the help. I just don't have any other resources or options. So I needed some other people to make sure that they make known. I'm not sure if any of you have been receiving any calls in the interim, but for the last several months, we've actually been handing out cards asking for people's help because our number one complaint is our entry condition. And making that post, I have had some things that have been said to me hostile as well, so I join you in that fact that this exposes me and brings a lot of raw things to the garden center that are unpleasant that we've been trying to get amended for now 4 years. I had a very wonderful meeting with Mandy this morning, and I appreciated that more than she will ever know. Each and every one of you were instrumental in getting us there, and I want to stay there. I want to make this business wonderful for years, and I need your help to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to work with you again, and I want you to hear me say I'm sorry if the community is taking that aggressively or too far. That's what I have amended the post, and I also offered to Mandy on Friday to delete it altogether because I believe the intent was taken to a different extreme than it was meant for. But I hope that the public can work with us to just try to get the right people's attention and get the right results. That's what we're trying to do, and we want to be good neighbors for everyone. So I wanted to hear you say I'm sorry on the record.
Thank you. Any other discussion, any other comments, any questions of Mrs. Callis or Commissioner George having a extended conversation this morning with her? Anything? Okay, Commissioner?
All right, then I guess I'd like to make the motion that we put together a committee consisting of members of staff, Commissioner Anderson and Mrs. Callis.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the motion as presented by Commissioner George to form a committee of staff, Commissioner Anderson, as well as owner, Mrs. Callis, on the issue of Shy West. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Is there any other non-agenda items that commissioners would like to bring forward at this time? Hearing none. Are there any staff or department heads that would like to bring anything forward at this time, a non-agenda item? Seeing none, Commissioner Simmons,
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson,
Second.
we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.